With the latest spice added to the Snake Eye deck, as well as support dropping in the near future, its power ceiling is about to explode. And this is leading players to drop the kings and go pure pyro. So in today's video, we're going to be going over how to beat the pure Snake Eye deck. Now, the main difference between the pure Snake Eye version and the Fire King Snake Eye is that in the Fire King Snake Eye deck, there are a lot of monsters that are a little bit beefier, such as the Greetz and then the High Avatar Arvada. And then they offer a bunch of interruption through Arvada's effect, through Kieran's effect, and then even with Greetz having that recursion, that is why a lot of players do opt into the Fire King deck, is because the late game with that deck offers a lot. But a lot of players are slowly shifting into the pure Snake Eye version because of the utility it offers as well as the consistency. While in the Snake Eye version, we do see some similarities with the Bonfire Populous Ash combo, leading into the original Sinful Spoils and then even the Flame Burst Dragon, but they do go a little bit more into the archetype with adding cards such as Oak and Birch, which are a little bit more consistent methods to being able to bring out the Flame Burst Dragon or recur it back onto the board. They do even have their own version of a field spell, whereas the Fire King Island is really good in the Fire King version. The Divine Temple of the Snake Eye is quite a formidable card. Being able to add any of the Snake Eyes from the hand, deck, or graveyard to their spell trap zone and then buff all their level 1 fires by 1100 attack, that alone is really good. But on top of that, whenever your opponent does summon a monster, you can essentially special summon one of your spell trap versions. And then other differences we're actually seeing that does send the deck over the top is inclusions of other level 1 monsters like Jet Synchron. Again, because we're missing things like the Greetz, we're going to be having a little bit more room in here for the cards such as Formula Synchron, being able to get you that extra draw, but also being able to summon it back with the Flame Burst Dragon during the opponent's turn. And then at that point, you could then use the Formula Synchron to synchro with the Flame Burst Dragon to go into cards such as the Baron de Fleur. Now, enough of what makes the Snake Eye deck good. We need to know how to beat the Snake Eye deck. Now, when we are going first against the Snake Eye deck, we have quite a few options to be going against them. Now, the first card we're going to be talking about today is a very popular one, and that is because it is Super Polymerization. And we know Super Polymerization has just been gaining in traction and playability. It is honestly just all around one of the best cards in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, not able to be responded to, and then ridding the opponent's board, especially after either they set up or, again, if you're going first, you can put this card face down, allow them to start setting up their board, and then flip the Super Poly on their turn, essentially just shutting them out of the duel. Now, Super Poly, again, you can use it going first, you can use it going second, and that's why it's number 1 on today's list. But Super Polymerization going against the Snake Eye deck is an amazing option, so do be considering that. And then following suit in another card a lot of players have actually kind of been opting into is Summon Limit. Now, Summon Limit has just been putting in work since we've been seeing all these kind of combo decks arise in the OCG and coming over to the TCG, just flipping up Summon Limit. As soon as they get that second summon off, they are out. They're not going to be able to be linking into multiple links, and they're definitely not going to be able to go into that Flame Burst Dragon if they're only able to summon 2 times. But if you are trying to spice things up going against the deck, and these are cards you're actually able to kind of fiddle around with, cards such as Power Filter as well as King Tiger Wangu will definitely be putting in work against the Snake Eye matchup. Power Filter essentially states neither player can special summon monsters with 1,000 or less attack, and a majority of these Snake Eye monsters are definitely under 1,000. Pretty much keeping you out of all the Snake Eye monsters until you would get up to the Flame Burst Dragon, but as you know, if you're not able to go into the mini monsters, you won't be able to go into the Dragon. And that is kind of the same to be said again with the King Tiger. We're seeing that if you're playing Branded or you're playing the Illusion Branded, you can actually sneak a King Tiger into the deck and be able to revive it back from the graveyard with the effect to revive a beast from the grave. And then if you're ending on the King Tiger, essentially any monster that is summoned with 1,400 or less attack will be destroyed instantly. So King Tiger is an amazing card against this deck, and again, if you're playing that or the Power Filter, you essentially will be shutting them out of all their summons. Next up is another card that has actually been in and out of a bunch of playability, a bunch of side decks, and that is Deck Lockdown. Now, Deck Lockdown is an amazing card versus the Snake Eye matchup. They're going to be cut out of adding monsters from the deck to the hand, as well as special summoning monsters from the deck. So that will actually limit their original Snake Eye spell card from summoning another monster from the deck. And then again, if they can't add off the Bonfire or off the Ash, their consistency is just not going to be there. So Deck Lockdown is definitely a card to consider, especially since you can kind of combo off with it, activate the Deck Lockdown, and just kind of sit there. And then this next card has been seeing a ton of hype in the OCG, and honestly, a bunch of TCG players have been trying to play it, and that is none other than Light and Darkness Dragon. We're seeing Light and Darkness Dragon being able to put in multiple negates on the board, kind of being a makeshift Appaloosa with a bunch of the attack points. This card is actually gaining quite a bit of traction, and would not surprise me if it does surface its way to a few victories, and some regionals are a little bit higher. But Light and Darkness Dragon, if able to be played, or you just want to kind of have a little bit of fun, is definitely a card that would be putting in a ton of work against the Snake Eye matchup. But going back to kind of old reliables, we have cards like Skill Drain, which will just completely cut off all their monster effects on board. This definitely will be putting a thorn in the side, keeping their consistency down. And then again, following suit with that is Soul Drain. As we know, Snake Eye actually has a bunch of reliance on their graveyards, as well as the effects in the graveyard. And even some of the support cards, such as the Prominence Princess, have a bunch of abilities that do rely on the graveyard effects from going off. So Soul Drain would be another card that, if you're able to play it and it doesn't hurt your deck, wouldn't be the worst card against the Snake Eye matchup. And then as always, if you're able to just completely shut off the graveyard altogether, do so with cards like Macrocosmos, Dimension Fissure. Both are an amazing cards. And then on top of that, we're going to be seeing Gravekeeper's Inscription as well as Necro Valley. Now again, all these cards are amazing against the Fire King matchup and the pure Snake Eye, so that is why these cards are definitely must-haves in a bunch of side decks when you're in this meta game. And now, I understand if you're playing a graveyard deck, you're not going to be setting 3 Macrocosmos, but if your deck can handle these types of cards, whether it's Inscription, Necro Valley, any of that, definitely be considering these cards in this metagame, considering how many decks they actually hit. Now, the last few spicy cards to be using going first against the Snake Eye deck is none other than Anti-Spell Fragrance. And as we know, Anti-Spell Fragrance is an amazing card. Again, Snake Eyes, Fire Kings, pretty much most of the decks in the meta game right now, because almost all of them have a bunch of consistency added through their spell cards, and if you're able to cut it off, it can be game right then and there. And then diving a little bit deeper into hitting out their specific spell cards, such as their continuous ones off their effects, we have cards such as Unending Nightmare being able to be played, cutting off the resources, paying 1,000, getting rid of those Snake Eyes that go to the back row, maybe even killing off their Formula Synchrons or their field spells. But honestly, Unending Nightmare will put in a limitless amount of work against the Snake Eye matchup. And then last card about the going first, and honestly, this is one where if you're playing more of a Snake Eye pure mirror match, do consider cards such as Gravity Collapse, okay? We're seeing Centurions be able to go into Synchros. We're seeing the pure Snake Eyes go into Synchros. So if you're able to get a Gravity Collapse off against pretty much any deck this meta, then you are basically going to shut off their turn and be able to just go right into an OTK on your following turn. So do consider that, because the moment you activate Gravity Collapse, their turn is just going to cut. Now, it's everyone's favorite part of Yu-Gi-Oh!, and that is hand traps. Now, as we know, a majority of these hand traps are best to be played if you are going second, but this one is very special because it can be played going first or second. But this first one is none other than Saravis, the Ancient and Ascended. And this is actually an amazing card being played in the Voiceless Voice deck that just dropped to the TCG. And that's essentially because when your opponent activates card or effect that targets a monster you control, as a quick effect, you can discard this card and then you negate the activation. But not only that, but if it is on the board as a monster, if you're able to ritual summon it out in the Voiceless Voice deck, when your opponent would special summon a monster or multiple monsters, as a quick effect, you can return this card to the hand to negate the special summon, and if you do, you banish the monsters. But right then and there, that actually puts an amazing amount of interruption in the Voiceless Voice deck. And not only is it an amazing hand trap if you're trying to go first to protect their monsters from the Veilers or the Imperms, but if brought out, it can essentially be preventing monsters from being summoned. So if you are playing that Voiceless Voice deck, just know the Saravis is definitely a good card against the Snake Eye matchup. Now, going back to your kind of everyday side deck option, we do have Fantastical Dragon Phantasme. and this again is going to be putting in work against the Fire King and the Pure Snake Eye matchup, which makes it an amazing card in the side deck. And that is essentially because we see how many links are played in this Pure Snake Eye matchup. We know they do play synchros, but links are especially important in this deck. Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is just kind of all around amazing in this meta, being able to summon itself, refresh your hand, and then block your monster from your opponent's targeting effects, such as Princess Bestower, and even cards like the Flameburst Dragon if they're trying to take care of the monsters off your board. That Fantastical Dragon will be putting in much interruption, so definitely be considering him. And then if you want to blow their board completely off the map, Nibiru the Primal Being is still an amazing card in this matchup. It is good against the Fire Kings, but they do have a tendency to be putting up interruptions before it is very viable. But against the Snake Eye deck, given that they are summoning so many monsters, Nibiru is definitely a card to be utilizing against them, as well as other decks in the meta game. And then this one goes without saying, if you could play Shifter, just play Shifter. Honestly, this card, anytime it is just good against the metagame, it is insane against the metagame. And honestly, I know the flu players out there, it might be a little tough time for them right now, but if with Shifter still in the game for them to be playing, this is still their meal ticket to a top 8. And then once we mention Shifter, we always got to follow it up with its little brother, and that is DD Crow. We know that DD Crow does put in some work against the graveyard decks. You couldn't banish things like the Flameburst Dragon, the Bestower of Flames. We have all sorts of targets that you can actually hit out of their graveyard, even things like the Link Karibo, so they actually don't get off a bunch of combos. So DD Crow is by no means a bad card to be playing against the deck. It's just really hard to compare it against things like the Dimension Shifter whenever you're having multiple cards being activated in the graveyard. And as always, we have to mention Ash Blossom Enjoy Spring, as well as Droll and Lockbird. Yes, Ash Blossom is very good this format. It will be blocking them from summoning from the deck, adding from the deck to the hand. Overall, just kind of hitting the consistency, being able to keep the Ash at bay, the Populace at bay, getting rid of the Bonfire. All amazing. But we know Droll and Lockbird has just been, honestly, the renowned hand trap of the format. And a lot of players are having to find ways of playing their deck around the Droll and Lockbird, because as we know, as the beginning of the format rolled around, Droll and Lockbird was pretty much an instant game over. But we're seeing players are finding ways to be playing around it, so it is not an end-all be-all hand trap, but I do believe a lot of players agree it is by far the best hand trap in this format. And now wrapping up these hand traps, we do have the next one is Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. We've actually been seeing Ghost Bell increase in popularity, not only in the OCG but the TCG, and that is going to be expected considering the graveyard format and it being able to block the most important graveyard effects from going off, such as the Flameburst Dragon. We're seeing why Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion is actually seeing an increase in playability as well as price. And then cards like Effect Failure and Infinite Impermanence do have their place in the metagame. They're amazing against the Voiceless Voice deck and do put in some work against the Snake Eye deck, but do not think that this is going to be a one-card shutdown on the deck unless they have kind of dead Drew already. But Infinite Impermanence and Effect Failure are pretty decent cards against the deck overall, especially since players are already playing them against other decks. Now, before we go into the board breakers, I want the viewers to do something for me. I want you to drop that sub. If you're enjoying this content, getting anything from it, or seeing your way back to the channel, do smash that subscribe button and share the video. But let's get right into those board breakers. Following suit is none other than Evenly Matched. And as we know, them being able to set up a board, even have some cards in their continuous spell zone, Evenly Matched will be really making them scratch their head on which cards they need to keep. And then we have the usual suspects: Triple Tactics Talents, Triple Tactics Thrust, just putting in work all together, especially since they activate quick effects during your turn. And then, if you are playing Pure Snake Eye yourself, do consider cards like Mind Control, Change of Heart, even Snatch Steal, especially since the Mind Control and Change of Heart are searchable, by the thrust. And then the last cards to be utilizing going second against that Snake Eye matchup is cards such as Soul Release. It completely kills Horus, hurts the Fire Kings, and really stunts the Snake Eye. So Soul Release is a card that we're just seeing again and again. Then last card on the list is Cross Out Designator, and that is because that Snake Eye does have all the cards that are pretty much being debuted in a ton of the metagame decks right now. So Cross Out Designator is definitely a card that I do believe will be seeing an increased amount of play as we see these decks just kind of face off against each other at a high level. But guys, that is how we beat the pure Snake Eye deck. And as always, if there's anything I missed, maybe there's a card that you utilize against the deck that will really just shut it down, do comment that down below. We'll always include those comments in the pinned section so other players can read them. And again, if you are finding your way back to the channel or get anything from the videos, please do smash that subscribe button and share the video with your friends. We're going to have other how to beat videos flashing above. But as always, guys, stay safe, have a good night, and suck it, nerds.